Hello and welcome to guess what? Pulling back the chemo curtain. It is Tuesday evening. It is rather late. My appointment was for 12:30 and I didn't get in here until 5 p.m. Partly because my doctor was 2.5 hours late, so it pushed everything back. So it's been a tiring day and a little bit emotionally exhausting too, because there's kind of a fork in the road in my treatment. When I was in the hospital last week, I had a scan, and the scan showed 10% progression or growth of the tumor. And usually, when a tumor grows, the idea is that whatever treatment you're on has stopped working, because these treatments, at a certain point, the tumor figures it out and they no longer stop the growth of the tumor. But just to complicate things a little bit, because why not? Things aren't complicated enough. There's something called pseudoprogression, which is where if you're on immunotherapy, which I am along with my chemo, you can have the immune cells which infiltrate and surround the tumor and actually appear to be real progression, but it's not true progression. But believe it or not, you can't tell the difference on a scan, on anything, unless you get a biopsy. And I'm not getting a biopsy because it's very hard to get sufficient tissue through a biopsy. And when I got one at the very beginning of my diagnosis, I ended up having fevers for weeks, and I went to the ER and I was told by an MSK doctor that the liver doesn't like to be poked. How's that? So, I'm in an uncertain place. It's very tough because my general style is I have a spidey sense for when things are changing, and I usually am out of it, and I'm out of there, right? Even something we left China 2012, 2013 era, when it was clear that things were shifting, that Xi Jinping was coming in and changing stuff, and a lot of expats stayed for many years after that, but we were gone. And I've done it in a lot of other places, on the ground in Bosnia, working as human rights monitor, recognizing that contrary to what the Dayton Agreement said, no one was going to care if we declared that there wasn't conditions for free and fair elections. So it was I'm out of here. So it's really hard to stay in this very uncomfortable place where I'm staying on the same chemo. We're going to rescan mid-December, and I feel a little bit like I could be a sitting duck. If we get 20% in mid-December, for me, 20% growth of my tumor would put me back to the size that it was when I came in with my diagnosis, where I was having so many issues like too much calcium in the blood, high liver enzymes, high bilirubin, and jaundice, and all these things. So I feel like we're on small margins because my tumor never shrank a lot, but it just stabilized. And I've been led to understand that stability is just as important as shrinkage, right? Because it's when things grow that they cause problems. But just having to sit in that uncomfortable situation, and just the Kafkaesque nature of it, you don't have enough to work. You can't make this up, that it could be true or it could be pseudo, right? For me, pseudo is aliases and front companies and the stuff that we used to investigate at the Security Council for North Korean illicit networks that were financing, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and all stuff. It was we'd always be amazed at the new ridiculous name they came out with, when there was a new sanctions list, and that company had to cease to exist on paper so that they could continue to evade regulators and governments and stuff. So keeps it light. And Kira K, who dragged me out last night for the first time, going to a CFR, Council on Foreign Relations event, for the first time in 3 years. And she said that we need, I needed a pseudonym. And she's right. So this is all happening to Aunt Lydia. And even all the cancer can go over to Aunt Lydia, frankly. So, yeah, so it's been tough. I sat with it. I cried. I danced in the bathroom. And, yeah, and just taking a breath now and just remembering I had an amazing weekend. One of my oldest friends was in town to run the New York City Marathon, which she ran to raise money for Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation in my name. She raised almost $6,000. And it was so lovely to see her. We actually were old running buddies doing like track and cross country and 10Ks and even a Midwest triathlon where we placed third. Our team did. And then I had her and her family over with another dear friend, you know, from decades back in Geneva. We made pancakes and went out to the garden. It's a beautiful English garden, and everyone just loved everyone else. And it was just that and the Council on Foreign Relations event last night, like this big room. It was Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor. It was like a dedication to Leslie Gelb, who was actually a mentor of mine. It's just kind of unreal, like after all this COVID stuff, and also because I'm immunocompromised, I try to stay out of those situations. So that was just really beautiful. And yeah, and like a few weekends ago, I was in our wetlands reserve in Connecticut with a bunch of amazing girlfriends. We were doing holotropic breath work and planning a big trip to India with Adrian shortly. So these are the things I'm looking forward to. You know, I'm very concerned about our country. It was last night it was sobering to hear the National Security Advisor talking about all of these policy issues, which I'm so glad I don't have to wrestle with anymore. It's very difficult stuff. Just kind of hoping that our country gets our act together and hoping that all of you voted, because that's the only way we're going to do this. So just a few thoughts. Sending you all so much love and hoping that you tell me what you do when you are trying to cope with uncertainty like this. I tried to do a decision-making tool. It's called Cartesian coordinates. You might actually get some use out of it. If you have a binary decision to make, also brings me a lot of joy. This is Kinder. I used to feed these to Adrian in Switzerland when he was a baby, and I would steal one for myself every now and then. So I use this great framework. It's called the Cartesian coordinates. It's like Battlefield, if you ever like played that game and you like call in the coordinates, but it's just a, very simple table with 4 squares. Top left square is what would happen if you did make this change. Bottom right left is what wouldn't happen if you did make this change. Top right is what would happen if you didn't make this change. And bottom right is what wouldn't happen if you didn't make this change. This helped me a lot in just thinking through this issue with like changing chemo regimes, etc. Before seeing my doctor, gave me a lot of clarity about which worst case scenarios I was more comfortable living through. So maybe that's of interest and maybe not. I love tools, decision-making tools. I have a whole book of them. And this is why I love coaching so much. Just all these different ways to splice the truth and to get at what's behind it, right? Sometimes we're not even in an actual decision. We're just sort of avoiding something. Anyway, sending you all so much love.